She was standing right in front of her neighbor, a woman she had known for 11 years, a woman who had watched her kids grow up, who had brought her soup when she was sick, who had waved to her every single morning from across the street. And in that moment, her mind went completely blank. The name was just gone, like someone had quietly erased it while she wasn't looking. She smiled, laughed it off, said something vague, and walked back inside. But the second that front door closed behind her, she sat down on the bottom step of her staircase and started to cry. Not because she had forgotten a name, but because she was terrified about what that forgetting meant. If that story feels familiar, if you've ever stood in a room and suddenly couldn't remember why you walked in there, or reached for someone's name and felt nothing but silence where the word used to be, then this video might be one of the most important things you'll watch this year. Because what's happening inside your brain when you forget isn't what most people think. And the solution isn't a pill, it's not an expensive supplement, and it's not something only young people can do. It's a habit, a free habit, one that brain researchers have been quietly excited about for years. And today, we're going to talk about all of it. Stay with me, because the information in this video gets more important as it goes on. And if you already know someone over 50 who jokes about their senior moments, please consider sharing this with them before you leave. This could genuinely change how they feel about their own mind. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome. This channel, Dr. Casey Morgan, exists for one reason: to take real science and translate it into something your heart and your brain can both understand. If that sounds like something you need in your life, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we post videos like this every week. And if this topic is hitting close to home already, go ahead and tap the like button. It helps more people find this information when they need it most. Now, let's talk about what's actually going on. Most people over 50 have been told some version of the same story: that forgetting names, losing words mid-sentence, walking into a room and drawing a blank, these are just normal signs of aging. Your brain is getting older. Your memory is slipping. That's just the way it goes. And while there is some truth buried in that explanation, the full story is so much more hopeful, so much more interesting, and honestly, so much more empowering than anyone ever told you. Here's what researchers have come to understand in the last 2 decades. Your brain is not a fixed machine that slowly wears out like an old engine. It is living tissue. It is constantly reshaping itself, rewiring itself, growing new connections, and yes, even growing new cells in the memory centers, well into your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. Scientists call this neuroplasticity, and it means that your brain, right now, today, has the ability to get sharper. Not just to maintain itself, to actually improve. But here's where it gets complicated, because neuroplasticity doesn't work on its own. It needs the right conditions. Think of it like a garden. You could have the most fertile soil in the world, but if you never water it, nothing grows. Your brain is the same way. It needs specific inputs to keep building those connections, to keep the memory pathways strong and clear and fast. And most people over 50, without realizing it, have slowly stopped giving their brain what it needs most. So, what does the brain need? What is this free habit we're talking about? We'll get there. And I promise when we do, it's going to feel surprisingly simple. But first, I want you to understand why memory starts to feel unreliable after 50. Because once you understand the why, the solution is going to make complete sense. Let me tell you about a man named Gerald. Gerald was 62 years old, recently retired, and by every measure of his life, he was doing great. Good health, a loving family, a home he was proud of. But something had been quietly bothering him for about 3 years. It started small. He'd forget where he put his keys, or he'd lose track of what he was saying mid-conversation. His wife would laugh and call it the Gerald shuffle, and he'd laugh too. But inside, he was scared. Because it wasn't just keys, it was faces he should have recognized, names of people he genuinely cared about. Once, he forgot the name of his childhood best friend for almost a full minute before it came back to him, and that scared him more than anything else. Gerald went to his doctor. He was told everything was fine. Normal aging. Don't worry. But Gerald was a man who needed to understand things, so he kept looking. He read studies, he changed a few habits, and within 8 months, his wife stopped calling it the Gerald shuffle because there was nothing left to shuffle. His recall had improved so noticeably that even his adult kids mentioned it at a family dinner. Gerald hadn't taken a single new medication. He hadn't spent $1 on supplements. He had simply learned what his brain was missing and given it back. Gerald's story isn't magic, it's neuroscience. And in a few minutes, you're going to understand exactly what he did and why it worked. But first, let's talk about what actually causes this kind of forgetting, because most people have completely the wrong idea about it. When we forget a name, most of us immediately assume the memory is gone, erased, lost forever. But neuroscientists tell us that's almost never what's actually happening. The memory is usually still there. What's broken isn't the storage, it's the retrieval. Think of your brain like a vast library. When you're young, you have a very efficient librarian who runs through the stacks and brings back exactly the book you asked for, fast. But as we age, that librarian gets slower. Distractions slow them down. Poor sleep slows them down. Chronic stress slows them down. And here's the one that nobody talks about: isolation slows them down dramatically. Research published by the Harvard School of Public Health found that people with active social lives in their 50s and 60s had significantly slower rates of memory decline compared to those who were more socially isolated. And before you say, "Well, I see my family," let me clarify something important. The type of social interaction that protects memory isn't just proximity to people, it's engaged, stimulating conversation. The kind where you're listening, responding, searching for words, reading emotional cues, telling stories, laughing, debating. That specific type of interaction is, according to brain imaging studies, one of the most powerful forms of cognitive exercise a human being can engage in. And this brings us to the habit, the free, accessible, research backed habit that can genuinely change the trajectory of your memory after 50. Meaningful conversation. Regular, intentional, emotionally engaged conversation. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That sounds too simple. That can't possibly be the answer. But let me explain what's happening in the brain when you engage in a real back and forth conversation, because it is anything but simple on the inside. When you're in a conversation, your brain is doing an extraordinary number of things simultaneously. It's pulling up vocabulary from long term memory. It's monitoring tone of voice and facial expressions. It's tracking the thread of what was said 2 sentences ago, so your response makes sense. It's anticipating what's coming next. It's managing emotion. It's making real time decisions about what to say and how to say it. Neurologically speaking, meaningful conversation is a full brain workout. It activates your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning and decision making. It lights up your hippocampus, your brain's memory hub. It engages your temporal lobe for language processing and your amygdala for emotional connection. No crossword puzzle does all of that at once. No Sudoku, not even most brain training apps come close to the neural complexity triggered by a genuine, emotionally connected conversation with another human being. A 2021 study from the University of Michigan tested memory performance in adults over 50 across different types of daily activities. Participants who engaged in at least 10 minutes of meaningful social interaction before completing memory tasks significantly outperformed those who did not. And the effect wasn't small. It was substantial enough that the researchers described conversation as a cognitive primer, something that actively prepares the brain to remember better. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The benefit isn't just in the moment. Regular, meaningful conversation over weeks and months actually creates structural changes in the brain. It promotes the growth of new synaptic connections. Those are the bridges between neurons. in the very regions most responsible for memory and recall. It reduces cortisol, which is the stress hormone that literally damages memory forming tissue in the hippocampus when chronically elevated. And it promotes the release of brain derived neurotrophic factor, sometimes called BBNF, which researchers often refer to as miracle grow for the brain. It's a protein that helps neurons survive, grow, and connect more efficiently. All of that from talking to people. Now, let's go back to Gerald for a moment. Because what Gerald discovered in all his research was that since retiring, he had dramatically reduced the number of meaningful conversations he had each day. At work, he had been in meetings, collaborating, problem solving, joking with colleagues, explaining ideas. He'd been mentally engaged for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 40 years. And then, almost overnight, that stopped. He was home, comfortable, but cognitively understimulated in ways he hadn't recognized. What he did was deliberately rebuild conversation back into his life, not in a forced or clinical way. He joined a local book club. He called his college roommate every Sunday. He started having dinner with neighbors. He and his wife set a rule: no phones at the table, and at least one real conversation every evening about something that mattered. Within weeks, he noticed the difference. Within months, the people around him noticed. This is the part of the video where I want to be completely honest with you, because meaningful conversation is powerful, but it works best as part of a broader approach to brain health. It's not the only thing that matters. Sleep matters enormously. Poor sleep is one of the leading drivers of accelerated memory decline because it's during deep sleep that your brain literally cleans itself, washing away toxic proteins that can damage neural tissue over time. Movement matters. Even a 30-minute walk has been shown to increase blood flow to the hippocampus. Nutrition matters, particularly omega-3 fatty acids, leafy greens, and foods that reduce brain inflammation. But here's why conversation is the one we're focusing on today, because it's the one most people ignore. People already know they should sleep more and exercise, but almost nobody is talking about the critical role that real human connection plays in keeping the brain sharp. And in a world where loneliness among adults over 50 has reached what public health experts now call epidemic proportions, this matters more than ever. Let's talk about something a little harder now. Because this video isn't just for you, it might be for someone you love. Think about the older adult in your life who lives alone, who maybe lost a spouse, who maybe moved to a new city to be closer to family but still doesn't know many people, who sits in front of the television most evenings because there's no one to call, no one to visit. That person isn't just lonely in the emotional sense. Their brain is being slowly deprived of its most essential form of exercise, and they may not even realize it. They may be laughing off their memory lapses the same way Gerald used to, until the lapses start to feel less funny and more frightening. This is why I'm asking you, genuinely and from the heart, to share this video with someone like that. Not because of the channel, but because information like this can change someone's daily routine in a way that changes everything else. One phone call you encourage them to make, one book club you suggest, one dinner invitation. It could matter more than you know. Now, I want to give you something practical, because understanding the science is one thing, knowing what to actually do with it is another. So here's what meaningful conversation for brain health actually looks like in real life, and how you can start this week. The first thing is intentionality. Most of us talk every day, but very little of it is what neuroscientists would call cognitively rich. We exchange logistics, we confirm plans, we scroll and react. What your brain needs is conversation that requires real thinking, storytelling, debate, reminiscing, exploring ideas, asking and answering questions that don't have a simple one-word answer. So be intentional. Make a list of 2 or 3 people you haven't had a real conversation with recently, and reach out this week. Not a text, a call, a visit if possible, a video chat at minimum. The second thing is novelty. Your brain responds most powerfully to social interaction that involves something new, meeting someone you've never spoken with before, discussing a topic you haven't explored, joining a group, a class, a community event. Novelty forces your brain out of autopilot and into active engagement, and that's where the real neurological benefits happen. The third thing, and this one is simple but powerful, is to start telling stories again, out loud, to real people. Storytelling is one of the most ancient and neurologically demanding human activities. When you tell a story, you're sequencing events, retrieving episodic memories, engaging emotion, monitoring your listener's reaction, and adjusting your language in real time. It is a full cognitive workout, wearing the costume of something enjoyable. Tell your grandchildren a story about something that happened when you were young. Tell your friend about something that moved you this week. Share something you've been thinking about. Narrate your life out loud, and your brain will thank you in ways you will feel. The fourth thing is to reduce passive consumption and replace it with active engagement. Every hour you spend passively watching television or scrolling through a phone is an hour your brain is not being challenged. Now, I'm not saying never watch TV, but consider this. For every hour of passive content you consume, try to balance it with at least 20 minutes of real conversation. Even that small shift, made consistently, has measurable effects on cognitive function over time. And fifth, and perhaps most importantly, take loneliness seriously as a health issue, not just an emotional one. If you are spending most of your days without meaningful human interaction, that is a medical risk factor, just as real as high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and just as addressable. There are community centers, faith communities, volunteer organizations, walking groups, hobby clubs, and online communities specifically designed for adults who want more connection. The barrier to entry is usually nothing more than making the first move. Now I want to circle back to where we started. That woman standing at her front door, name gone, heart sinking. Because here's what I want her to know, and what I want you to know if you've ever stood in that same terrifying silence. Forgetting a name doesn't mean you're losing your mind. It means your brain's retrieval system slowed down, and for most people, that's not a verdict, it's a signal that something needs to change. And the beautiful, hopeful, scientifically grounded truth is that the brain can respond to those changes at almost any age. The research is clear on this. The stories of people who turned it around are real. Gerald is real. And the habit that helped him, meaningful, engaged, intentional human connection, is available to every single person watching this video right now, completely free, starting today. Your brain was built for connection. It evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in community, in conversation, around fires and dinner tables and shared stories. When you give it that connection again, it responds. It wakes up. It remembers. Before I close, I want to ask you something. In the comments below, I want you to share your experience. Have you noticed your memory changing in the last few years? Have you found something that helped? Or maybe you have a loved one whose story reminded you of what we talked about today? Write it out. Not just because it helps us create better videos for you, but because sharing your story is itself an act of connection. And connection, as you now know, is exactly what your brain needs. If this video made you think of someone you love, a parent, a neighbor, a friend, please share it with them today. You never know what a single video can unlock in someone's life. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Dr. Casey Morgan, because every week we bring you the kind of real, warm, science-backed information that helps you live and think better. Your mind is worth fighting for, and we'll be right here helping you do exactly that. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself, and take care of each other.